Hi, I'm Mr. Hazel, and today I'm going to show you how to make a musical instrument with your microbit. You're going to need a microbit, a USB cable, a power pack, 4 wires with alligator clips on the end, 3 objects that will conduct electricity. There should be 3 washers in your kit, and you're going to need something to hear this musical instrument, some sort of a speaker. Headphones will work great for that. So your first step is going to be to connect your microbit to your computer using the USB cord. Open a browser and go to makecode.microbit.org. Now, if you haven't seen any of the intro videos or previous videos, this is probably not the best place to start. You should start in one of those two places, with some of the other videos or even with the introductory video, if it's been a while since you've done one of these projects. And this one is a little bit different because it doesn't have a lot of coding, but there is a little bit more circuit building, which is super exciting. All right, let's get started. I'm going to start a new project, and I'm going to call this keyboard. Woo, there we go, keyboard. Now, I don't need my on start or forever, so I'm going to bring those over into the trash. And like I said before, this does not require a whole lot of coding, but a little bit more circuit building. So let's get cracking with the coding. If you'll remember, the microbit has several pins. Now the pins are these gold-colored areas that will be able to receive and send different types of information or energy, and 0 and ground are both used for our headphones, if you can recall from the other musical activities we've done. And 3V is a little bit complicated. It's sort of tied up in the LEDs as well as a way to get power if you don't have a battery pack or a USB cable. So the two that we're going to be using today are pin 1 and pin 2. Okay, so we're going to go into our programming blocks here, and as an input, we're going to use the on pin pressed. So this is one we haven't used before, but it functions just like the button or the shake, that it waits until the input or the pin is pressed, and then it will perform all of the coding that will be inside of here that we'll put there in just a minute. Now, I'm going to bring this down to P1 because we know that our pin 0 is going to be used for our headphones. And I'm going to duplicate this. Now when I've duplicated it, you'll see that one of them is grayed out. And that's because it can't have two different functions that it performs, or two different blocks of code that it performs when P1 is pressed. Now it can perform more than one function when P1 is pressed if more than one function is put into this area. Oops, let's move those back. So let's change this to P2 and we should get it nice and purple again. There we go, it's good to go. Now a 2-note musical instrument is a little bit tricky to play, so let's add a third input, and because we're out of usable pins, we're going to use on button A pressed. Okay, now we have to tell it what we want it to do when these different things are activated. When these different inputs occur, what do we want our microbit to do? Well, when button A is pressed, we'll go into our music menu, and we're going to select tone. Under tone, play tone middle C for 1 beat. We're going to select that, and we're going to duplicate it so we have 3 copies, one for each of our inputs, and you'll see that they'll click right into place. Okay, now immediately after we do that, we can see that our simulator over here changes to show how we would need to hook up our headphones to be able to hear what the microbit is playing. But we'll worry about that in a moment. I just wanted to point it out because it has changed immediately on the left hand of the screen here. You can also see that they sort of cover up each other the way that I have them laid out. So I'm just going to move them slightly just so that it's a little bit clearer. Okay, so if we click middle C on button A pressed, play tone middle C, let's change that one. And if we click on it, it will show us right away a keyboard, and you can press the different notes to see what they sound like. So for this activity, let's start out by making the press button A as middle E. And instead of for one whole beat, because one beat is kind of a long time, let's do a quarter beat. So that's 1/4. That's a 1/4 beat. Let's change our on pin 2 to playing middle D, and we're going to do the same thing. Let's change it for a quarter beat. And let's leave pin 1 as middle C, but change it again to a 1/4 beat. All right, now at this point, all of our programming is actually completed. This is all we need to do for the program. So let's download it onto our microbit by clicking the 3 ellipses here and download to microbit. We're going to make sure that our microbit drive is selected, and we'll click save. Now once again, that orange flashing LED light will turn solid when the program is completely downloaded onto the microbit. There we go. Mine has just done that. So now I'm going to close out of these menus and unplug my microbit. Okay, so now the entire program should be right here. Now, because this next part is a lot more about circuit building than it is about programming, I'm going to make myself a little bit bigger on the screen here. So how you're going to start is we're going to start by connecting the speaker to your microbit. Perhaps I can move this to the side a bit here. There we go. So we can see in our simulator that they've given us a diagram to help us out, which is super helpful. So we want to take one of our wires with an alligator clip, and we're going to connect one of the ends to the 0 pin over here. So I'm going to do that now. Now the picture shows it connecting kind of like this, which is totally fine. But if you want, you can also connect it inside of the circle, and that might help hold it there a little bit more, like this. Okay, so I've got one connected to 0, so I also need one connected to GND, or ground. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to select 2 different colors just so that it's a little bit easier for me. So I have a red color that's connected to my 0, and a black color that's going to be connected to my ground. Okay, there we go. So I have the black connected to the ground and the red connected to the 0. And just like my simulator over here, I am going to connect the 0 pin to the tip of my headphone jack, like so. And I'm going to connect the ground to the middle part of my headphones, like so. I'm going to put one more clip down. There we go. Now, this is my opportunity to remind you that there's no volume control whatsoever on this microbit program. So what that means is that you cannot put these headphones into your ears, because if you do, it will be so loud it may damage your hearing, and we don't want that. It's also a harsher sort of tone to hear that loud, which is why it would damage your ears. So it's not pleasant either. It is pleasant slightly far away so that you can still hear, but not necessarily damage your ears. Okay, so the speakers are hooked up. And now what we have to do is we have to start creating the circuits that will give inputs for pin 1 and pin 2. So right now, it's kind of going to be a mess of wires. So we have, again, we're creating a circuit here. So the power is going to come out of pin 0, going to go along this cord into the headphones, do what it needs to do in the headphones, and then to complete the circuit, it's going to come back through here, the unused portion, and come through the ground. And that's how the energy travels. So that's how the energy travels through the headphone portion. But what we need to do is make some circuits to activate pin 1 and pin 2. So let's connect one of these wires to pin 1. It's a bit slippery. And let's connect another wire to pin 2. Okay, so now we're starting to look like a bit of a Frankenstein experiment here, which is awesome. And we are going to connect one more wire to the ground because remember, we're making a circuit, so it has to come all the way back over to the ground. So I'm going to connect one of these black wires to ground. Now we already have something in ground, and that's okay. You can connect another either just to the side where it says ground, or, and this is the cool part, because the electricity can be conducted or can travel along anything that is metal, for instance, we can just simply connect this second alligator clip to the first alligator clip. I'll show you what that looks like here. So I have my first ground alligator clip for my headphones here, and the ends that poked out of the bottom, that is what I used to connect my second alligator clip. And because the metal will conduct the energy, that's okay, because they're all connected. Okay, so now, again, even more of a Frankenstein experiment, but awesome. Okay, I'm going to sit this down here. Now, the ground wire that we have here, we are going to connect one of our washers to the other end of that wire. Boop. That is our ground. Okay. Now for pin 2, we're going to do the same thing. And for pin 1, finally, we are going to do the same thing. Okay, so I've just changed the angle here so that we can see it a little bit better. This is the part, like I was saying, where we're going to be making circuits. So we've already made a circuit with the headphones because there's power coming out of pin 0 and it's going to come through the headphones and then back out of the headphones and through the wire into our ground pin. Now, for that power to even be there, we need to plug in our power pack. The power pack has a ridge on part of the connector that lines up with a groove in the matching connector on your microbit. So plug in your power. Now at this point, we can check and see if our headphones are doing what they're supposed to be doing because one of our inputs was input when button A pressed. So that should play a note of E, and let's hear. Aha. So that makes the note of E. Now to make our other two notes, what we want to do is complete the circuit for pin 1 or pin 2. To do that, we are going to use our own human body, because our bodies will conduct electricity just like these metal washers. So with one hand, I'm going to hold on to the washer that's connected to the ground pin right here. Now remember, washers are what I have built this video with, but you can use any sort of material that will conduct electricity. Now we don't have to worry because our battery pack here with two AAA batteries in it has got a very, very weak energy signal. So it's not the kind of energy that could harm us in any way. In fact, we won't even feel it at all. But for this type of experiment, it's good to know that beforehand, which is why I'm telling it to you right now. So to complete the circuit, all I have to do is touch the washer that is connected with a wire to either pin 1 or pin 2. So let's put the speaker here and let's see if it works. I'm going to touch pin 2 first. There we go. So it's playing our other note. Now let's try pin 1. And it's playing that one as well. So with these 3 notes, we can play an awful lot of songs. I'm thinking of an old tune, Hot Cross Buns. Let me see if I can play it. There you go. You have made your own microbit instrument. So, if you're anything like me, you might want a few more notes to play around with. Try duplicating on button A pressed and see if you can make some other inputs that might give you some more notes to play around with. Otherwise, you could just simply play with those 3 and see what sorts of songs you could come up with. Finally, you can have more than one tone being played in each pin. If I was to duplicate this and add it in here, I could have it play middle C and middle E at the same time. This sounds confusing, but it's a lot like playing an instrument like a guitar, where you strum 6 strings at once, and each of them can be playing different notes. With a system like this, you could create 3 or 4 different guitar chords that you could use to play different songs. That's just an idea that you could poke around with if you have the time. If not, just enjoy your magnificent microbit musical instrument.